Oh, man. Oh, this is good. This is good, folks. The NBA leading Celtics 21-5, and we get to talk about it. Welcome into Celtics Beat. Adam Kaufman, Evan Valenti, we're always here with you. And, of course, our very special guest today, Keith Smith from Celtics Blog. You know him there. You see his takeaways after every single game. Spot Track. He's got his podcast as well that we'll do all the time. I mean, you're multiple podcasts for that matter, because I saw you're doing something with Adam Taylor over on Heavy now. You're all over the place.
Yeah, I like to keep busy. You know, there's bills to pay, college to get saved for, so we got to do it all.
So this right here, it's a little bit of and Evan can attest to this. You may not know this, Keith. I don't expect that all of our guests are diehard listeners and viewers of this show, much as I would like you to be. This is kind of a catch-up show for us, because over the last couple of weeks, we've dovetailed into becoming a celebrity podcast. We had Donnie Wahlberg on, a lot of good Celtics talk in there, obviously, some Patriots stuff too. Last week, we had Tom Everett Scott on, so not as big a Celtics fan. We were talking a little bit more about his Boston fandom in general and his acting career and some good stuff. Like, it was a great show. But now we're getting back into the nitty gritty of the green, which I think our listeners probably appreciate a little bit. And there's some catching up in the sense that we haven't in great detail talked about the Al Horford extension and just sort of the climb that the ascent that this team is on right now. And I think it's perfect timing to have this show on the heels of an embarrassment of the Suns, one of the best in the West in Phoenix, a perfect road trip so far, and of course on the cusp of a finals rematch in Golden State against the Warriors, which is coming up as we sit here and chat a little more than 24 hours from now. So good timing to just kind of take the pulse of everything. And I'll just start things off, Keith, by saying I love, I can't say it enough, I could scream it, I love what is happening right now with this team in terms of the mission statement, in terms of everyone keeping their heads even keel. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, effectively both saying none of this means anything unless you win banner 18. I love where they are at mentally, and I think it's going to take them a long way.
That is arguably, for me, the best part of this, too, is that their quotes after each game, and they seemingly get kind of more impressive each game on the floor. But it's a lot of, we didn't really defend too well, or we turned it over too much, or we could have done this better in this stretch in the second quarter of a game they won by 20. And they're obviously very, very focused. I know we were talking briefly before we started about our shared frustrations with the Patriots, but it's almost like a Patriots-like approach where it's like, hey, it's just, we're focused on the next game. And within that, though, there's a bigger picture where, we've got to just keep doing and keep moving and trying to get better. And I think that's huge. They're not, nobody before the Suns game wanted to talk about the Warriors game. It was the Suns game. That was it. That was all that mattered. Let's talk about that. And then now we can talk about the Warriors game moving forward. So I think that's an impressive mindset that's going to serve them well, all the way through the rest of this regular season, which honestly, we're starting to get to the point post-Christmas in a few weeks where it starts to become a little bit of a grind for guys, where it's kind of like the dog days of summer in the baseball season, where we just got to get through February, March, and get into April, May when the playoffs start.
It's funny that you bring up the connection or sort of the similarities to the Patriots, albeit obviously in an opposite effect of success right now. But so I was on my guy Brady Farkas show the other day, and he asked me, and I'm paraphrasing his question, but he basically asked, are Celtics fans getting it all kind of, after reaching the finals last year and hoping to get back there this year, and how well they're playing, a little bit bored, for lack of a better word, with what's happening right now, where it's like, all right, wake us when we get to the East Finals, in the same way that Patriots fans for so many years with Tom Brady was, all right, none of this, like the regular season, whatever, they're going to win 10, 14 games, 12, 14 games. Like, just let's get to the AFC Championship game, and then the season starts. That cockiness that we had for 2 decades with Tom Brady and Bill Belichick working together. And I said to him, maybe just because it's early in this and that took 2 decades to really get to that point emotionally, I don't think any Celtics fans feel that way. I think we are all, and I include myself in this, I think we are all just so enjoying the ride and the rise and the climb and what they are achieving, because it, while it's come easy, quote unquote, so far this year. Historically, it certainly hasn't. And these guys are so young that it's just fun to dream about the fact that it could be like this year after year.
Yeah, I think you have Celtics fans who are kind of split into some different camps here, but are all at the same place in the end. And you've got the first group who was like, I told you, I knew this was coming. And this is why we can't trade these guys. And you got to stick it out. Then you have the kind of other part of the group who was like, well, prove it to me. And now they're like, hey, they proved it. And in the end, it's funny because I see it being on Twitter as much as I am. They still want to go to battle with each other. And in the end, they're both like, no, they're awesome because, and it's like, you're both getting into the same point. Just enjoy it and go. So, but yeah, I don't think there's a sense of taking it for granted. I know it was a huge Patriots fan. I took it for granted, but before it kind of all just came to an end, I was very much like, well, they're just going to be good for forever. And it was funny because then I kind of flipped a switch when they went back in, right? They went into the period where they didn't win for a number of years. And then they won the last three when they won. And those last three I enjoyed. I don't want to say more, but I really tried to frame it as like, this is never going to happen again in my life. But there was a point prior to that where I took it for granted very much. Whereas like, I remember having a conversation with my dad, and it was before the Rams Super Bowl, the second one. Mm-hmm. And I said to him, remember when we were just like laughing hysterically that this team that my entire life was basically terrible, punctuated by a couple moments of excitement. And now it's like, they win all the time. And then he goes, yeah, he goes, then remember when we got so, angry about like, why are they not winning the Super Bowl? They should have just won 0-16 and all the silly stuff you say. But yeah, I don't think Celtics fans are there yet. I think for the most part, it's, hey, I'm going to enjoy every second of this team and how they push this thing forward.
Yeah, you can put me in that latter camp there. I'm way into I'm enjoying every second of this. I don't think anybody's getting too far ahead of themselves, because I think if you're unless you're just hopping on and this is your first season really watching the team, I think most people understand there's a long way to go here. But B, like the fact that this is happening in real time, you have to enjoy this because, I'll go back to, I'm not going all the way back, but you go back to like the first game, Hayward, Kyrie, Hayward breaks his ankle in 5 minutes. Like it can be over super quick. And, again, that team accomplished a lot and, set some of the groundwork for the team that we see today, obviously, with Tatum and Brown getting so much run at such a young age. But, like, that's how quickly this can change. And so you better enjoy this right now because, at some point there could be a huge major injury coming. We don't know what it is yet. Hopefully this team gets through this thing unscathed and gets to the NBA, it gets to the playoffs healthy. At this point, like, we can talk about a whole bunch of stuff, but the only thing I care about is health. That's it. By the end of the season, if everybody's healthy, I'm good. We're going to be in a good spot. But
if I can cut you off for a second, what I will say to that, to both of you is, and I think Keith already alluded to this, and I know we talked about it off air, the fact that like they just went out and trounced the Suns at their high point by almost 50 points in Phoenix without two starters, because we still include Rob Williams in that. He hasn't played a second this year, but he's still their starting center when he does come back, which could be in a week or two. They're winning games in some cases without three starters or without three starters and, a key reserve, like without four of their top 8-9 guys in their regular healthy rotation. So, just to sort of piggyback on what you're talking about, the depth here is and we said it in the offseason, like it's not surprising, but in the sense that it was expected, but it is surprising that it's just so good. It's performing at such a high level.
Think about all the time we spent on the reserve guys, thinking and fighting over like who's going to take this spot, and this spot. Well, first off, that's all mattered, by the way. Like all of those little spots have mattered. So like, again, Adam, you and I in the dog days of summer when there's nothing going on, like for the fourth straight episode, we're going to talk about the 14th man in this roster. Should Kevin Kelly get that spot? Like we talked but all of it,
like Luke Cornett and Blake Griffin have mattered a lot.
Absolutely. Blake, people might think we're blowing smoke here, but Blake in these spot starts of Al has been amazing considering what I remember watching Blake do when he was playing with the Nets. Like he's playing, he's really contributing to winning basketball. And he's not perfect. Nobody is out there, okay? But Blake gives you energy on both ends. He knows how this offense works. I'm pretty impressed with that, considering he's only been here for a short amount of time and only played with these guys a short amount of time. You can tell he knows where he needs to be on both ends. He takes charges. I love for the fact that he really crashes on the offensive glass and tries to get them opportunities. He doesn't have the same athleticism anymore. We know that. But he makes up for it in effort. And Luke Cornett giving them solid minutes. I mean, Peyton Pritchard barely plays. And when he plays, he changes the energy in the game. This is why I think we're starting with the please appreciate this, because they're getting contributions 1 through 11, 1 through 12, 1 through 13. It's all blending together to play. And this is the best basketball they've played. I mean, look, the 08, 09, 010, like that's a really special group. And you can't get lumped in with that group until you win a title. So I'm not going to go that far yet. But this is the best basketball Celtics fans have seen in 20 years. And if you want to go further than that, I don't remember the 86 Celtics I was not born yet. And I've seen bits and pieces, but I wasn't going along with every single regular season game like I am right now. If somebody was like, hey, this is the best basketball they've played since the 80s, I'm not going to sit here and tell you you're wrong. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I think to that, the 08 team, the KG Pierce team, that whole run, that was so foundationally built on their defense. They were impossible to score on at times. And I think the offense was a slog at times for that group. There were times that they might beat you by 20, but it was going to be 90-70. It wasn't going to be 110-90. And, so that group there, and I think I said this the other day, and I had a couple people like, I don't know, that might be going too far. I do remember the 86 team. It's one of the first teams I really remember being super duper invested in and watching, every game that I could. It was the 84, 85, 86 run there that really was my foundation in basketball. And that 86 team, this team moves the ball like no Celtics team since that team. And I think I go back to, it was almost a year ago when Marcus Smart was basically begging Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown to it's gonna come back to you. You just have to trust us. Just be with us. Go through this with us. And when they finally did, that's when the team started to take off. They locked in some defensive stuff as well last year. But this year, it's gone to a whole new level where I think Tatum and Brown, they're so willing to give it up on those driving kick plays because they know, all right, it may circle right back around to me wide open for a jump shot. We've seen that time and time again this year. Or, the secondary attacks. I think Malcolm Brogdon has brought a whole new level to what they want to be. And one thing I will say too with the fans, which I think has been great, is how I know they're not buying in is it was probably right around just before Thanksgiving. So about 2-3 weeks ago, I look at the comment section on the articles I write quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot in there of, man, this team is dominant and let's just get to the finals and all this stuff. And over the last couple of weeks, it started to turn into, they're really, really good. And I still think they're going to be the best team, but we got to clean up turnovers. We got to clean up the defense. We need to make sure we rebound in the clutch situation. So it's now fans are even buying into what the team is telling them of hey, we're not perfect. So they're starting to not nitpick, but just starting to point out if we could just clean up this one thing too. And that's been a lot of fun to watch that development as well.
Well, I want to read something too that Evan had sent me the other day.
Oh boy.
Well, don't worry. It's a stat. It's not a quote. You had sent something from StatMuse on our text thread about this Celtics offensive rating this season. In October, 119, which would already be good for first in the league, by the way. 119 points, offensive efficiency, points per 100 possessions. November, 120.8. Since Thanksgiving, 124. The best offense is all the time getting better, is what it says there with that stat, and obviously led by Tatum and Brown and Smart. And I bring that up because Keith mentions the ball movement and so many questions surrounding what has been, and articles have been written about it nationally. It's not just the local guys anymore. What has been an historically great offense. I mean, truly, this has been, we're early, like we're not even a third of the way into the NBA season, although we're pretty close. This is the best offense, statistically speaking, that we have seen in the history of the NBA. And people keep asking, Keith, is this sustainable? Is it sustainable? Can they keep it up? And here is the reason, and you just alluded to it. Here is the reason why, yes, it is sustainable. The ball movement, the way they are moving the ball with such fluidity, so effortless, just guy to guy to guy, getting it around back to Tatum, whatever, and getting the looks that they're getting and getting, it's like they're just in the gym taking open shots all the time. So that's why, like, people, wonder, and we've talked about it on this show, are the 3-point percentages that some of these guys on the Celtics that are all like above 40%, are they going to drop off? Is water going to find its level? All of that. I would say no. I mean, maybe a hair while Tatum and Brown climb and Smart climbs a little bit. And, the general average pretty much stays the same, even if some guys fluctuate a little bit. The reason that I don't think it's going to move all that much is because of the ball movement and the looks. They're just getting open shots in the freaking Y. And it's easy, for lack of a better word. It's relatively easy for them to just go out there. Horford, Hauser, obviously, Grant, White, Brogdon, you name it. Like, they're just knocking down their open looks. The whole make-miss league thing, well, they're making them. And if they keep doing that, then yes, this world-beating offense, Keith, is sustainable.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what's going to be funny is they're going to go through a roughish patch at some point, right? There'll be a game or two or maybe even three in a row where they just don't shoot very well. And I'm going to be very curious to see if people are like, wait, what happened? Did somebody figure something out and with that? And I think it's just because that will happen. But I think when you look at the totality of the season, yes, they have some guys who are shooting above their heads. But when you look at the other guys who we expect to shoot better, they're not. So I think as they come up, to your point, even if other guys drop a couple percentage points, Tatum and Brown are going to come up a couple percentage points. And it's generally NBA players tend to shoot really well on open shots. And the Celtics are generating, if not the most open shots in the league, it's got to be really, really high. I think also their shot profile is great. They have, outside of Jaylen Brown pull-ups, which I am 100% fine with him taking mid-range pull-ups because it feels like he never misses one. Outside of those, they don't really take a lot in the mid-range. It is basically layups, three-pointers, or they get themselves to the free throw line. And that is so huge. And that's, getting to the free throw line now, like Tatum does. You've seen a few points in this year where things have been kind of tight. Just puts his head down, bowls through a guy and gets himself to the line. And that's kind of how they resettle. I thought the game against Brooklyn, where the Nets were giving them a little bit of trouble. The Nets, you could tell, were kind of like, all right, we saw Miami do this the game before. We're going to get real physical. We're going to really hit these guys. We're going to be super active. And when it got a little bit kind of messy, Malcolm Brogdon came in and just was like, everybody relax, settle down. Let's just kind of do our thing. And having him off the bench is great because normally we think about the bench as that's going to be an energy guy who comes in and plays, lights out and is, 100 miles an hour and all those things. And instead, the Celtics have this guy who comes in, plays like the, over 35 league at the Y, just kind of moving it slow, but always getting where he wants to be. And he's just kind of making things happen. And I think that's the cool thing with this team. They can match basically any style you want to play. Yes, Miami gave them some trouble, but it's going to be the point I made when somebody said that they give the league the blueprint. And I said, maybe, but does the league have the personnel to pull that off?
Right.
Because Miami is super physical. They want to play that way. They basically said, hey, we're going to dare the refs to call, a million fouls if they want tonight. They didn't in that game, and it just got, messy. And the cool thing for me was the Celtics didn't wilt like we've seen them do in past years, where it's like, all right, everything's going against us. We're not getting calls. We're going to spend the entire time complaining. They did it for a little bit. Then they kind of got back to it and said, all right, let's just play our game. It was right there at the end. And if Jimmy Butler doesn't make like 3 hero shots, which tends to be what Jimmy Butler does, the Celtics win that game too. And the win streak is, I don't know, what would it be, at 10 or 11 games right now?
Right.
That's why I'm not worried about a loss like that, because Miami had to do everything right, and they still barely get out of there with a win.
I'll tell you what, though, watching the end of that game and the shots that Butler was hitting, the shots he was creating, the way he was taking over, and just, obviously, I took some flack on Twitter for this, but I do believe it. I don't view Jimmy Butler as a superstar. I view him as a guy who has superstar moments, and oftentimes they come late in games. And absolutely, he was doing it right there. It just made me appreciate the fact that he didn't hit that 3-pointer back in the East Finals. It's like,
Absolutely.
You know what? Do whatever you want right now, Jimmy.
Yeah.
Just thank you for missing that 3 when you had to hit it, because that would have just wrecked everything that we're talking about. But with respect to this offense right now, and it is like it's on the ascent. Well, the defense is quietly ascending as well, and you don't think about it as much because there's still, a lot of people still look at like some of the traditional stats. Yeah, I mean, yeah, they're still allowing well over 100 points a game, and so people don't necessarily lock into defensive rating the same way that we react when we see them put up 125 or 140 points a game offensively. But they've climbed to the top 10. They're 9th as we sit here in the NBA after being bottom 10 for so long. I know that it's not wire to wire number 1 like last year, but they are climbing. They are top 10 in the NBA in defensive efficiency right now, with Rob Williams slated to come back sometime between now and Christmas. He's coming back, folks. He's on the way. He's scrimmaging 5-on-5. He's going to be back. Woj is talking about it. Rob is returning. My question, though, is before we talk about defense at some point here, how much does Rob in your mind elevate the offense, Keith?
Yeah, I think what it gives them is that real major play finisher at the rim, which is they are lacking to an extent. It's by no means is it a weakness or anything like that, because they're obviously still doing just fine with it. But when you have it, just Rob Williams hanging out in the dunker spot, as we're kind of running that 4-out actions with the good spacing, that's a completely different feel than Luke Cornett being in that spot, even Al Horford in that spot, certainly Grant Williams or Blake Griffin. Teams just, they're going to regard that differently. And I think what that does is that creates a whole different thing, because you're going to see sometimes Tatum and Brown, I think, especially early in the year, they would drive and it was like, oh, I want to throw the lob here because I drew the help. But it's like, oh, Al is drifting out to the corner versus going up at the rim, so then it'd be, all right, I got to throw up something, that I didn't intend to actually shoot this myself. And I think that's what's going to change things. I think they'll look different for sure than they do right now. It won't be as much 5-out. But the thing I think people are forgetting is Rob Williams is a very, very good passer. So you can at times put him into some of those 5-out actions where he'll be the initiator, whether it be a dribble handoff, a screen. They really like to run those pitch back plays and those kind of things, whether it's something like that. And then what he'll do is then he just kind of works his way down to the block. And as you're in, the defense is now in scramble mode because you've had him in rotation, because you've hit the paint twice. Then the next thing you know, it's a lob to Rob and it's a dunk. And that's what I think we're going to see look very different with this group, but I don't think it's going to be worse. And that's the thing I keep trying to tell people is different is not worse. It's yes, they may fall off some because when you're historically good, there's really only one way to go is down, but it's not going to be because Rob Williams came back. It's just going to be because that was some natural regression to the mean there. But yeah, they're going to be great when he gets back to on the offensive end.
Yeah, that's the thing that Keith mentioned about the help defense that comes when Jaylen or Jaylen or Smart or Brogdon or White, like when they penetrate into the teeth of the defense and they get in the paint, they get in the lane, like that help comes up. And as Keith referenced, like a lot of times, that could be a guy that Al has, that's supposed to be guarding Al, but Al's now drifting in the corner and to make the spacing better. Throwing it up to Rob is actually a better shot than throwing it out to Al at 3-point range. Just going to be flat out honest about that. And the other thing that's going to be interesting is the offensive rebounding opportunities that they're going to have, because Rob is clearly their most athletic player and is going to be able to gobble up some stuff. And he has just terrific vision. How many times have you seen Rob like dive for a ball out of bounds and just like somehow find someone at the 3-point line on a random tip out and somebody has an open shot. Like that's going to be added to that too. And putbacks and the offensive rebound, like that's all going to add. Like I agree with Keith. It's going to be different. Is it going to be better? I don't, I can't get on that quite yet, just because like how can you get better than the best ever to do it? But at the same time, they're going to have better opportunities possibly with Rob in there. I think it will take some time. I think Rob's going to need some time to gel with everybody and gel with this offense. But I mean, his life's going to be super easy. It's not like he's going to have a really hard time to get points. Like he's just going to have an easy time. And that's the thing that's so remarkable about this offense is they seem like they get so many easy, good looks at the basket. I think it drives other teams crazy. Like I've referenced this a few times in this pod and other podcasts. Keith, I don't know if you've had the opportunity to listen to other teams' broadcasts when they play the Celtics, but
yeah, I do sometimes.
It's so fun because they're like, oh, well, they can't keep shooting like this. And then like by the third and fourth quarter, it's like, well, they're all open shots. Like, what do you want? And this is going to be more of that, I think, with Rob because of the element that he's going to bring. Like, and the best thing I think is because he's unlike any player they have. He's going to change the geometry a little bit on the floor. I'm really curious to see what Mazzulla comes up with to take advantage of that. I mean, it's just again the rich keep getting richer here, and Boston's in a really good spot. I've been of the mindset like let's just hold Rob out for as long as humanly possible because they clearly don't need him at this current moment. But at the same time, like you do want to see what this quote unquote offense looks like at full capacity. Like you can. I don't know. I'm just excited. That's all. I'm excited for Rob. I'm excited for everybody. But man, this has just been like just too much good stuff happened. Too much good stuff happened.
Yeah,
you didn't need Jaylen Brown starting the fourth quarter in Phoenix with the team up 75 points either. But sometimes you just do things because they feel right.
Yeah, that's funny. I think to Evan's point too about opposing broadcasters, when I was putting the takeaways clips together after the Raptors game for Celtics blog, it was all of the clips came from the Raptors broadcast. And there was a play late in the game when it was still fairly close where the Celtics, they hit the paint like twice on the same possession. The ball pinged around. Jason Tatum had initiated everything, worked its way back to him. He hit it. And all you could hear, I think it was Matt Devlin, the Raptors broadcaster. He went, yep. It was just this full like resignation of, yep, well, that's it. It was the one that basically that kind of ended the game for all intents and purposes. Yeah. And I think that's what one of the kind of things where we're going to see here. And on Rob, I had this conversation with some people where they were, well, how long do you hold him out? Like they really don't need him. And I said, well, if he's 100%, he should play. But that's not 99. That's not even 99.9%. When he's 100%, play him. Now, you play him and you be super careful with him. You keep his minutes down. If he's feeling anything, you sit him back out. But 100% is 100% play. There's no reason why you can't play when you're at 100%. You just got to be very cautious and very careful. And I don't think it's funny. I was kind of laughing. I said, I think what we'll see is Al Horford continue to plays the front end of a back-to-back, doesn't play the back end. And Rob will probably do the opposite, right? Because he's probably not going to play back-to-backs either, at least not early in the season. And, right now this great start has kind of put you in the position where, it's you in Milwaukee, so you gotta hold them off because they're despite how great Celtics are playing, the Bucks are only right behind them. But it's just kind of get into the playoffs and get their mode because you're afforded that by racing out to this great start.
All right, so we have spent many shows over this season, the year's life, it feels like, talking about the growth, maturity of Jason Tatum. And I don't feel like there are enough, or maybe I've run out of superlatives, quite frankly, to just fawn over Jason Tatum. So you know what? I'm not going to do that right now. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to fawn over Jaylen Brown. And I wish he was here to hear me say this because short of, hearing it like Zoom face to face, I don't think he ever will. He's probably not a listener of this show, but I put it out on Twitter too, Keith and Evan. I don't know if you saw it. Just an apology to Jaylen Brown, because I've never doubted his development, his growth, his desire, his, like all of the things that make a good player great. I've never doubted that Jaylen Brown has those attributes ever. I always have marveled at the fact that it seems like each and every offseason, no matter how short the offseason, he adds something new to his game. He takes it to another level. But what we are seeing so far from Jaylen Brown this year, I always thought, and this is no knock, like there are only so many of these guys. I always thought that his ceiling was perennial all-star. And how many of those guys are there? A couple dozen? Like there aren't many. Maybe 20 perennial all-stars, 15 perennial all-stars. I thought that was the height. Jaylen Brown, though, is playing at an all-NBA level. He is playing at a far more exclusive level than I ever thought possible for him. I thought, like Jason Tatum is that guy. Like he's that superstar in waiting and now a superstar. He's that future MVP, maybe even this year in the NBA. He's that future possible scoring champion for the Boston Celtics and in the NBA. Jaylen Brown, though, at career highs in scoring, in rebounds, in blocks, in field goal shooting percentage and free throw shooting percentage. The rebounds aren't, the assists aren't far off. He is just having a transformational year, Keith, that each and every night I'm more and more impressed.
Yeah, it's really, I've long felt with Jaylen Brown, when he made errors, it's a really good example of errors of commission versus omission, where he was just trying too hard. At times it was like, I have to make something happen. And I don't know if that was always just, I felt like the team needed me to do that. I'm trying to compete and show who I am as a player. Either way, it's not a bad thing. Those aren't, bad things. I've never once looked at Jaylen Brown, even when I've been like, boy, that was a bad play. I've never thought, what a selfish player or anything like that. I've never had those moments. It's just been, hey, come on, trust the system here. Trust your teammates. It doesn't have to all be you. I think back to that Atlanta game from last season when they played without Jason Tatum, and I want to say he had like 7 or 8 turnovers and no assists and took a million shots. And that was one where it was like, you had to trust in the guys a little bit more. So now, flash forward to this year, they play against Washington. Jason Tatum doesn't play in that game because it was basically turned into a rest day for him. And Jaylen Brown was amazing. He did his scoring, but he got it all in the flow of the offense, all in the flow of, all right, I'm going to take a few more shots because Tatum's not here, but I'm just going to kind of do my thing. And that I think is what's so exciting about watching this team. You have both of these guys, and there's nobody else who has this in the league. There's other teams with 2 really good players, but there's nobody where, all right, the one guy is off, so he's only going to get 20 tonight, so the other guy steps up and gets 35. Like they're just they teams don't have the 2 scoring machines the way Boston has them, and that is pretty cool. And I think this stretch here where he's just played 3 games, 107 plus minutes, and he's had 1 turnover in those 3 games, you're showing signs of, all right, I can do these things. I can be a little bit better. These are what I can do. And it's funny because I think people keep wanting to put a ceiling on Jason Tatum, like you said, right? Because I was with you. I was like, I might once in a while make an all-NBA team. If everything goes right, maybe that's where he pops, but he's really an all-star. That's what he is. But then looking at it, it was like, no, I think I need to start changing that assessment. It might be he's in the mix every year for all NBA. And as long as the team keeps winning, that's how you get to all NBA level guys. Yeah, he's been a lot of fun to watch develop. And anytime somebody says Jaylen Brown can't do this or can't do that, seems like he comes back, whether it's the next season or sometimes in season with, all right, I can do this and I can do that. And that's a lot of fun too.
Adam, I texted you on October, I texted the group chat on October 5th. All NBA Jaylen ? And I think we're even further down that road at this point. And I think what's interesting is if Boston ends up with the top record in the league and they have the most efficient offense in the league, I'm not going to say they're going to finish with the most efficient offense in NBA history, but I think they're going to probably have the best offense in the league I major injury here. At that point, like, just because of the team accomplishments, I feel like you have to have 2 guys on all NBA. I mean, I feel very weirdly about, Jason obviously is going to make it. The question is, what team does he fall on? And right now, I think it's a pretty good lock for first team all NBA. But obviously, again, we're not done yet. But where Brown would end up on the list, I find kind of curious whether he's going to be labeled as a guard or a forward. I think is interesting. He plays a wing position. I guess if you go back to the traditional sense of things, he's a 2 guard, but he really plays more like a forward. And if they play, you might be able to do it because they're playing these Smart and White lineups a lot, where Smart and White are your backcourt and Jaylen and Jason are part of your front court. So maybe you can get it done that way. But second team All NBA at this particular juncture in time feels like sort of right. But at the same time, Keith, in this sort of world, you kind of have to bounce someone before you get, on the team yourself. And I'm not quite sure who Jaylen could bump, because Durant's having an insane year. Okay. I know that they might not, they're up to 4th in the East now, so maybe not as much, but he's been insane. He's been outrageous. But other than that, and Tatum,
how much you look into trading for that guy?
Yeah, I know, right? But where does Jaylen fall on the NBA list? I think is going to be an interesting debate as we get towards the end of the season. But I think season ends today. He's second team All NBA, no question. Am I crazy on that, Keith?
No, I don't think that's crazy at all. I think there's a really good chance. I mean, I think part of what happens with the All NBA is sometimes guys like Jaylen can get hurt in the voting because if too many people vote him as a guard versus a forward. We saw that happen to Jason Tatum just a couple of years ago. He got really kind of missed out because of the way the votes came in at different positions. So that becomes something we'll have to keep an eye on. But I think for now, what you do is it's just you kind of start looking through. You kind of pencil in all your guys. And at this point, most of the voters, they've probably got about 20-ish guys in, for 15 All NBA slots. So some of them are going to be locks. You're just going to drop them in there. I think, Tatum, Giannis, Anthony Davis at this point, guys like that are absolute locks to be there. And then you just kind of go from there with this. But yeah, and it's funny because on one hand, it feels like it's not even Christmas yet. It's early in the season. But then on the other hand, we're a third of the way into the year by the end of this road trip. So it is one of those things where it's like, it's not quite as early as it seems because that second half, it zips right by because you do take the long break for the All-Star break, you have the week off and those kind of things. So it happens very, very quickly that it goes through. But I think, for Jaylen, just kind of keep doing your thing. And the biggest thing that'll help him get that spot is they just got to keep winning games. And if they keep winning games, especially at the clip they're winning them at, they're absolutely going to get rewarded with 2 guys on the All NBA team.
I don't want to throw this.
We just
go ahead
quickly, contractually for the audience here. If Jaylen makes All NBA, does that we can trigger the extension this upcoming
5 for $290 after this season. He could
if he makes All NBA. So essentially root for Jaylen to make All NBA because they can offer him the max extension and that gives them a year earlier than they would if he didn't make it. Right? That's correct.
Absolutely.
Do we assume though, Keith, that we throw out the numbers and of course, to us, it's a no brainer, but do we assume that 1, the Celtics would offer that the second they could, and 2, that he would sign it?
I think the answer to both of those is yes. We've never seen a player turn it down. People keep saying, well, Kawhi did turn it. Kawhi didn't. It never really got to that point with the Spurs where it was even offered because they knew he didn't want to be there. But in this case, Boston would 100% offer it because you can't let him go at that point. And one thing is, if you don't offer it, that's insulting, right? It's like, hey, wait a minute. I just, earned my way into this. You gave it to Tatum, no doubt. Why is there any kind of doubt with me? And then I think and I'm not trying to bring anybody down here, but if it was offered and he didn't sign it, that becomes now we're living in a whole different world of what is the future of this team? What is the future of Jaylen Brown with this team? Because there's literally no reason for him to wait because because I've seen somebody who said, well, maybe he bets on himself and gets even more money. No, how it works is it's going to be for 35% of whatever the cap is. So they'll sign that in advance. I'll be one of the first ones to be like, here's what the numbers are on the deal, but it's 35% of the cap. So if the cap goes up, he's gonna see that even if he signs a year ahead of
so it's not like a blanket 5 for
Correct.
$290. It's 5 for
Yeah, 5. Yeah, it'd be a max for whatever the amount of the cap is. I wrote about it extensively on Spot Track. If anybody wants to look, just Google Keith Smith, Jaylen Brown, Spot Track. It'll pop right up, and you can read about all the different options and why. Because I've seen some people say, "Well, why won't he extend right now?" Well, he'd leave a ton of money on the table if he extended today,
Right.
and that's even without any All NBA considerations going in. So that's a big chunk of why he's not signing an extension now. So even though he is eligible, but because it just doesn't make sense. And it's kind of the same thing we've gone through with other guys around the league. We've talked about it a million times. Guys just don't do it because it doesn't make sense. But yeah, in this case, Boston would offer it, and I'm 90% certain he'd sign it because that's also, I have to live in the real world of the NBA where if it does all go south a year or two into it, just ask for a trade. That's just how it works in this league. And that's just where it'll go if everything fell apart.
I don't want to turn this into a talking point just in the interest of the time that we have left in the show, but I just want to mention sort of in passing, because I joked before, but I'm happy. I'm happy, Evan, that we together, I think, but definitely this show, emphatically on the right side of history in the number of times discussing the potential summer swap. This show never wanted Jaylen Brown traded for Kevin Durant. Never wanted to see it. Didn't even want to see a 1-for-1. Not that was mathematically possible, but just to highlight how much we didn't want to see the trade. Didn't even want to do that swap, let alone the depth it would have required, sacrificing with Brown to get Durant in the first place. So I'm just happy. I'm happy that has worked out for Boston, and obviously for Brown as well.
Yeah, my new talking point. I don't even know how to explain it, but it's like one of the things that I'm very emotionally invested in is just clowning all the people that said the Derrick White trade was bad. It's just to me,
oh my God.
They're like, oh man, he didn't really have it in the NBA finals. I'm like, yeah, well, neither did Tatum. A lot of people didn't have the NBA finals, guys. It just didn't happen. But having Derrick White is better than not having Derrick White. And they're like, well, I'm like, that pick is not going to matter. Don't worry about that. But what Derrick White has done, and he was on Old Man the 3, and I'm a quarter of the way through it. So I'm not totally all the way through the whole interview yet, but Derrick White's just a guy you want to have on your team, and it's just easy to root for and does all the right stuff. And, you listen to him, he's such a humble person considering his, if you don't know Derrick White's story by now in terms of how he got recognized, basically at the last minute to get a D1 spot eventually in his, college career. He's an incredible story, A, easy to root for, B, but he just does all the right things. And then Ben Sullivan working with him in the offseason on that jump shot has paid off tremendously. Because it's oh, well, if Derrick White figures out how to shoot, look out. Guess what? Derrick White is shooting the crap out of the ball right now. And add that to all the things all the little things that he does on the defensive side of the ball, how he pushes the pace, how he gets everybody in the right spot. They have Brogdon, but they also have Derrick White coming off the bench too, or starting, depending what they want to do. That's such a huge luxury. It's insane. So we've moved on from the Jaylen Brown is underappreciated, or Jaylen Brown should not be traded in any regard for Kevin Durant. And now my new thing, Kaufman, is people needed to respect Derrick White more because he didn't when it first happened. But before it's too late, you better hop on this train too, because Derrick White rules, and everything he's been doing has been tremendous. I mean, he's another big reason why this team is 21-5 right now.
Yeah, I think that hate on the Derrick White trade was way off base. I thought he was a big part of giving this team what they needed. And then I think where Brad Stevens excels is, unlike others where we've seen, and he's not the dual coach GM, but he's still a coach who's become the GM. Where that has failed is trying to, I got to give the coach everything he needs today with no looking forward or anything like that. And then I think what Stevens has done is he's able to say, all right, maybe adding Malcolm Brogdon is a little bit of overkill. Maybe we could have been okay with Peyton Pritchard if he just played more. But you know what? Why even take the chance? Let's just go get him and let's make it happen. And I think when you have a guy like Derrick White who starts, comes off the bench, he's still going to play his 25 minutes a night. It's got to be effective in whatever you ask him to do. He doesn't really seem to care either way. And then with Brogdon, I think the fun thing with him, because a lot of the same people who hated on the White trade were the same people in my mentions hating on the Brogdon trade with the, well, why did we have to do this? And that's another first round pick and all these things. And it's like, who cares about first round picks that are 25 or later? Like it does, those, maybe it'll matter, 5, 6, 7 years from now. But if you win a title or go to a few finals in between there, you're not going to care about a pick, 7 years down the line, like would have happened in the White deal. But I think what's been cool with Brogdon is his candidness about, hey, I've gotten hurt a lot in my career, and it's not as much for him. He just said this recently in an interview. It's not just about playing a lot of minutes, but it's also, I had to play a huge, heavy usage role where I had to do everything for those Pacers teams. And he said, I just wore down and it got to me and I started missing games. And I think on this team, it's one, again, you're feeling anything. There's the guard depth. You take the day off, take 2 days off, take a week off if you need. But when he's out there, you don't have to do everything. Just be another cog in the machine. Just kind of play your role, do what you're asked, do your thing with that. And I think that's been really great with both of those guys. And again, David, I know, because I think I did one of those summer shows with you guys where we're like, well, let's talk about the depth. And it was like, well, Brogdon seems good if he can stay healthy and, X, Y, and Z. And now all of a sudden it's like, I even have people occasionally being like, should we think about trading one of these extra guards to go get something and Peyton Pritchard? I'm like, right now, you don't trade anything on this team. We just keep it moving exactly as it is. Maybe by the time we get to February 9th, the season will have told us something and something will have emerged as a need. But for right now, just keep things moving. There's no reason to make any kind of trades or anything like that, because the last thing you want to do is upset any of the balance.
All right. Before we go, something that we have not talked about in weeks because our recent guests are not part of it, but that changes here today.
Why even talk about it?
You got to bring it up. Our Celtics Beat Invitational Fantasy Basketball League that we have here. There is only one winless team so far at 0-7 on his way to 0-8, and that is the guy who flipped to the fingers, Evan Valenti. Meanwhile, not great. Our guy Greeny is out here taking it very seriously, and he is 7-0. Nothing but respect for that. Mark Murphy bet me dinner on our matchup last week and lost, so he owes me a meal and his dues, which he will pay. I'm not worried about him. He's just enjoying retirement. But Keith Smith out to a 5-2 start, battling Murph right now. You got a barn burner at the moment. How's the fantasy hoops season treating you?
Yeah, it's going well. I got off to a little bit of a rough start. I think, we're early on, but it's, the team's starting to come together. It was funny because a couple people were like, man, like, well, why did you take Robert Williams in that draft? They're like, he might not even play it now. Like, he's just sitting there chilling in my IR spot. I'm gonna throw him out there when we're ready to go. So I'm pretty psyched about that. I feel really good about the team I put together. Hey, all I know, our locker room's great. My fantasy guys are playing hard. They're working hard, so I feel really good about it.
If I have one, it makes it more challenging, so it's fine. But if I have one regret, and it's obviously impacted you the entire season, is that I didn't do multiple IR spots as opposed to just the one, because then you would have had a little more flexibility, some, roster movement and that type of thing. But you've had to just play with what you've got more or less and lock the, just lock Rob in the dungeon there for a while.
Yeah, and it's going to pay off down the line.
Oh, yeah.
I feel pretty good about it. So I'm happy with it. I came away. I did a handful of different fantasy basketball leagues this year, and I tend to be the guy who it's usually sometime around January or February. Like I just forget, and then I don't set a lineup, and then it's like Wednesday, and I'm like, oh crap. And then I figured it out. But I had one goal, and I was like, I want to get Jason Tatum on every team I have, because I picked Tatum to win MVP before the season. I thought he was gonna have a monster year. That league is the only league that I don't have Jason Tatum in.
Hey, I had the opportunity to draft Jason Tatum, and I didn't do it. I drafted Joel Embiid instead. So.
Yeah, I think Greeny had the pick before me, and I think he snagged Tatum right before.
Yeah, Tatum was not getting past Greeny, trust me.
Yeah.
I debated it, and I kept thinking about it, and I was like, well, my teams in football have been a disaster. So I tried to, I did the emotional hedge where I don't take a player that I want to do well. So I was like, we'll just take Embiid, and if he dominates, great. If he doesn't, well, hey, we'll see how it goes. I played the health card too much, and like Davis has been really good, but Davis has also been like in and out of the lineup every other night. So it's just hard to get any like. Cade Cunningham's gotten hurt. Anthony Edwards. That whole situation in Minnesota's been a dumpster fire. all my gambles just didn't pay off at all. So hey, that's life. That's baseball, Susan. So we'll get back to it at some other time. But it's just been a brutal start for your boy over here. 0-7. What am I? 0-7.
0-7. Yeah, and taking on Bobby Manning, who is like basically as bad. He's 1-6, and I don't even know if he sets his lineups. You need to get going with it. Even Washburn's won a couple games by now.
Yeah, Washburn beat me last week.
Yeah, so there you go. Been a while since Keith's been with us here on the show. We enjoyed the reunion here, Keith. Thanks for coming on, and we will meet again both on this show and in the fantasy streets as well.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right, for Keith, for Evan, I'm Adam. Go Celtics. Take down the finals rematch, folks. See you later.